Our next speaker is Rene. Rene Karunangan. Rene is a climate journalist, campaigner, activist, and communication researcher from the Philippines. She has been involved in the climate justice movement since 2009 and has worked for organizations as Dakila, Climate Tracker, and Tintel Center for Climate Change and Research. Rene is currently doctoral researcher in political communication at Loughborough University, United Kingdom. She did her post-graduation in media and international development from University of East Anglia. She is a freelance journalist and has published and presented on climate change and human rights issues in Asia and globally. In 2018, she presented at the Cambridge Climate Series of lecture at Cambridge University, where she talked about engaging youth for climate change. In 2017, Rene published an environmental children's book, Where Did All the Fireflies Go? Listed as one of the best Filipino children's book of 2017. Title of her session is Capitalizing on Fear or Hope. How do we communicate climate change? Welcome, Rene.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, and thanks everyone for making it to this webinar we have today. And I would like to thank the university as well for inviting me. And so today I'm going to talk about more on evidence-based approach on how do we actually communicate climate change through photography or climate visuals. And my title is Capitalizing on Fear or Hope, because a lot of photography or climate visuals we see these days are sometimes extreme. So sometimes it's always we want to communicate tragedies and disasters, or sometimes on the other hand it's just we want to communicate hopefulness to the world. And so there needs to be something in between fear and hope, because too much fear will actually stop people from engaging because it makes them feel like they're helpless, that they can't do anything more. And meanwhile, too much hope shields us from the reality of the impacts of climate change. So I will start by sharing my screen. To start my presentation. Great. I hope everyone can see my screen. So, as I said, we are now going to talk about how do we effectively communicate climate change through photography. So let's start with why photography. Why is climate visuals important? And I would like to say that there is a lot of power in images. Sometimes words aren't enough, and we have to rely on images to make sense of the things around us. And according to Helen Jove, a psychology professor at University College London, the power of photography is that it is vivid, it is emotive, it draws on the audience, and it makes it memorable for them. Next, there's also a study by an American psychologist, Robert Sajong, and he says that sometimes hard data and statistics are important in communicating the facts, but people can be tired of this. There's such a thing as data fatigue or statistics fatigue, and they simply do not do the job in persuading people to act. So imagine we read a lot of news about climate change, how many acres of land will be lost because of climate change, or how many people will be climate refugees. But sometimes the numbers are too big and we can't imagine this. And sometimes they're too far away from us. And so we can't see clearly, what does this mean? What does this data mean? So with photography, we can convey how it actually feels, how it actually sounds, or how it actually looks. Visuals strike more emotively than numbers. And so the right use of images will affect people's perception on climate change and what they want to do about it. So this is why we have to learn, what is an effective visual. And most of my talk today will be from a research by Climate Outreach, who's done a very, very good research on asking the audience, what makes you want to engage with climate change? What makes you want to stop engaging in climate change? So not all kinds of images are actually effective. So later on, we will see, are protest images actually effective? What kind of politician images do we use if we need to use one? So we'll talk more about this. Okay, so currently, according to research, there are 4 types of climate visuals. The first type are climate impacts, and we see this almost every day. It's a drought, fires. Currently, the California wildfires are all over the news. Typhoons, polar ice caps melting, flooding, etc. So that's the first one. The second one, it's the climate solutions. So the solutions to climate change. So solar panels, renewable energy, wind turbines, gardening, sustainable farming, etc., etc. The third one are climate causes. So what's caused climate change? So usually we see fossil fuels, coal-fired power plants, pollution, polluted cities, etc. So these are also some of the images that we constantly see in the news. And then the last one, and maybe less familiar, it's called the news stories. So these are more thought-provoking and can help tell a news story about climate change. So usually these are stories of everyday climate solutions or everyday lives that we don't really see in the big news or in mainstream media. And on the next slide, I will show you an example of these photographs. So the first one, climate impact. So as you can see, this is a wildfire. This is from Australia. And currently in the news, if you've seen going around in international news, the California wildfires are actually, all over. So that's an example of climate impact. Second one is climate solution. So here you can see a photo of a woman climbing to adjust a solar panel in her community. And if you can see in this photo, it's actually not just a climate solution, but you can see how powerful it is because it's an everyday woman. It's not an engineer. It's can be your neighbor, can be your sister, and trying to do something, for her community. The third one is called climate causes. So as you can see in the background, I believe this is in China, you can see coal-fired power plants polluting in the background. And this is an example of a climate cause photograph. Sometimes you'll see other causes, but mostly you'll see these coal-fired power plants. And then the last one, as I said earlier, is the news stories. So for news stories, this one, for example, you won't see every day in the news, but it tells something different. It tells something new. So in this photograph, you can see a vertical garden in a building. And this is kind of like a new solution to city pollution, for example, in reducing carbon emissions in a community or in a city. So that kind of photography is rare, but can be impactful as well. So what are the 8 principles of climate visuals? What makes climate change photographs effective? And again, this is based on evidence. This is based on research. So first one, we should hook your audience. What does that mean? So we should captivate the viewer's attention right from the get-go. Powerful visuals, powerful images. We have to remember that we are visual animals, and our understanding of the world is dominated by what we see and how this makes us feel. Okay. The second principle is to show real people and not staged photo ops. So we want to use authentic images. We don't want to use staged ones. It doesn't connect very well with the audience. It feels fake. People's presence is also important. Uh, Pictures or visuals with only a few people or a few animals than larger groups are actually best. People connect more to individuals or fewer people than a large group. Direct eye contact that doesn't look staged is okay. And credibility is also important, which means that politicians should be avoided because a lot of times the audience that we want to talk to don't trust politicians. But if our story, for example, is about policy making, or it's an important news about a politician, make sure that the photo isn't staged. You don't ask the politician or the politicians to pose for you. It needs to still be authentic. So the third one is to tell new stories. So the easily recognizable or the more common images that we see on media are polar bears, wildfires, melting ice caps. Okay, so these are what we see all the time. But these kinds of images only tend to engage audiences with little interest in climate change. And these images also evoke the most climate fatigue and cynicism in the research. Not because if we keep using the same images over and over again, the audience, the people, the public will be tired of it eventually. We need to show them something new, something they haven't seen before. And if you look at this, polar bears, for example, it's so far away from Asia, it's so far away from India, it's even far away from where I am in the UK. Like, I haven't seen any polar bear. I mean, they're cute and we feel bad for the polar bears, but eventually these images just go out of our mind. We tend to forget about them and we don't engage about them. It's like, oh, the polar bears are sad and they're going to die, but how does that affect me? It doesn't engage me as a person, and a lot of the audience feels the same. The next one is show climate causes at scale. So we have to make visual choices that show behaviors at scale rather than individuals. For example, eating meat, show environmental impacts of industrial animal agriculture. Rather than a driver filling up a gas tank, show the destructive environmental consequences of our fossil fuel society. So the last thing we want to do is to blame individuals with our individual actions. Okay. The principle of climate justice is that, we recognize that those who have polluted more aren't individuals. Our individual footprints aren't as big as fossil fuel companies or cement companies, for example, who have been burning and extracting fossil fuels for decades. So, our research show that they're actually the ones who need to be accountable to us. And so if we keep on blaming individuals, individuals will start feeling like, well, if you keep blaming me, what can I do about it? So we need to show climate causes at scale. Next one, emotionally intense climate impact images only work with practical guidance on actions. So the research is clear. Climate visuals that show emotionally powerful images of climate impacts compel people to respond. So for example, a lot of tragedies, we see a lot of donations, for example, celebrities suddenly wanting to donate lots of money, or we can ask ourselves, what can I do to help? But at the same time, these images create a counter emotion, feelings of helplessness and resignation. So as I said earlier, if these images keep bombarding us, then we just feel helpless and we feel resigned. It's like, I've done what I could, but it's still happening. So what else could I do? And eventually, if this fatigue takes over, people also stop engaging. So climate visuals of impacts need to be coupled somehow with guidance on concrete actions people can take. So, a good call to action, for example, is what can you caption your photo with, what can you do at home, or what can you do as an individual to respond to these tragedies or to these impacts. Okay, and then next, we have to show local but serious climate impacts. So local scenes, especially those that we are familiar with, can evoke a greater resonance with people who are from the same place and from people who know these people from this place. Yeah, so for example, if I see a typhoon or a tragedy in Asia, it makes me feel really connected to the image because I am from Asia and I know and I've felt the impacts of climate change in Asia. But if you show me melting ice caps, for example, near the Arctic or the Antarctic, for example, in Peru, although these images are really nice, I really couldn't connect very well because I didn't grow up in a country where there are ice caps. So local images can have more impact within the local community. So images of local climate impacts, including individuals with identifiable emotions, are the most powerful in research on climate visuals. So remember, this is the most effective, most engaging kind of photography that you can show to your audience. Next, be extra careful with protest imagery. So I know that there's a lot of protests going around right now. And especially with climate change, there's Fridays for Future, where children go out every Friday to protest. There's the Extinction Rebellion protests, etc., etc. But you have to be careful with the use of protest imagery because they only resonate with people who are identified as environmental activists. So some people who don't like activism or who don't like to be involved in this kind of thing are actually turned off with this kind of images. You can't engage with people who are not already part of the group. So you have to choose images and video involving people directly affected by climate impacts. So for example, if you want to photograph protest image, if there is an indigenous woman in the protest, maybe that's more powerful than taking a photo of the whole group because then there's more of a story there that we haven't seen before or that hasn't been told before, and it might connect more to your audience than taking just a whole group photo of protesters. Climate justice frames are generally viewed negatively by those on the right side of this political spectrum. Just a point to keep in mind if that's the audience you're trying to reach. So take into consideration who you are communicating to. Are we preaching to the choir, or do we want to communicate and converse with someone who don't really usually believe in climate change, for example? Do you show Donald Trump a photo of a protesting climate change or his climate change act? I don't think so, because Donald Trump will just be like, why are you showing me pictures of protests? I hate protesters, right? So we have to be extra careful about protest imagery and who we share it with. Next is we understand our audience and their politics. So you have to constantly ask yourself, who is your audience and do you know their politics? This is connected to the principle earlier I was talking about. So a large body of research show that people's political beliefs drive how they engage with the issue of climate change. And this includes not just their political beliefs, but their value system as an individual. If you're a conservative, right-wing individual, you view climate change differently as someone who's in the climate justice movement. So you have to know who are we talking to. Knowing our target audience and therefore who we are trying to persuade and what we are asking them to do will enhance the effectiveness of your visual choices. Okay, so I'm going into my last slide. So this is a quote from O'Neill and Cole, who are also climate change communicators and researchers. They say that climate change images that take into account a person's values, attitudes, belief, local environment, and experiences are important in creating meaningful engagement. So you always have to remember who your audience is, what they believe in, what their environment is. And then when you take a photo, ask yourself, is this what they want to see? All right, thank you very much. And if you want to connect with me, this is my email, my Twitter, and my website. And I would be glad to answer some of your questions.
Thank you, Rene, for the great perspective. Our moderator, Tara CB, will ask you the questions of our audience.
Hello, Rene. I'm Tara Ravishankar. I'll be moderating the questions. Due to time constraints, we'll be picking only a few questions. And moreover, Archana Sarang, she is a bit busy and she couldn't stay with us after 9:25 Indian time. So move on to our first question. How much do you feel that how much do you feel that when people see what climate change is through climate photography will change their perspective on climate and act upon it? How much do you feel that when people see what climate change is through climate photography will change their perspective on climate and act upon it? Hope you got the question. Rene, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me? Have you got the question? Should I repeat it? Hello? Shall I repeat the question, Rene? This is a question. How much do you feel that when people see what climate change is through climate photography will change their perspective on climate and act upon it?
Hello?
Hello, Rene?
Hiya, can you hear me?
The question?
Yeah, no, I got the question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll answer very quickly. So I was saying earlier that we don't have control over other people's behavior. So the best we can do is tell our stories through photography. And hope for the best that they will act on it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It depends on, as I said, the kind of person they are, the kind of stories we tell. And the best we can do is tell the best stories we can.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Anyway, I'll hand over my mic to Manju ma'am.
Thank you, Rene. So there are a lot of questions. We'll be mailing it to you. As you said, it is essential to engage young people in the climate change discussion. Young people will surely be affected more with the climate change. Photojournalism as a tool can significantly support for mobilizing support for policy change and decision-making process. Thank you for your time And best wishes for your research on political communication. Using Facebook for winning national elections is a great topic. That's for another day. We look forward to having you again as a speaker. Thank you once again.
Thank you.